So we're live now. Welcome everybody to this broadcast of Teaching Towards Tomorrow. My name is Jenny McGarrett, and I am the Digital Learning Coordinator of a network of 32 Chicago public schools called the Academy for Urban School Leadership. And I'm so glad that on today, Wednesday, February 4th, the beginning of Black History Month, that we are bringing on the amazing educator and author Sarah Ahmed of the book Upstanders. Woo! I feel like Ellen, I have your book here live. Um, Upstanders, to talk to us about how students in the classroom this month can take the ideals of social justice and the tenets that we try and learn about the history of Black History Month, but take it to the present to become upstanders in their classrooms and communities. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So Sarah, our schools are all in areas of the city of Chicago where students are fighting issues of social justice every day, and teachers are trying to think about ways to empower their kids to become exactly what you described with Smokey Daniels here in this book. So I was just wondering, what inspired you to write this book? I know that you're a classroom teacher here in the city of Chicago as well.
Mm, I was. I miss it dearly. Part of the inspiration of that book was a lot of the conversations that Smokey and I have had for a long time. He's been my mentor since 2009. But it really stems from a few different places. One is the kids that I've worked with in Chicago. Two is an organization called Facing History and Ourselves, which we mention in the book. And they're dedicated to, kids, teachers, and the conversation in a community, just about what's gone on in history and asking questions about how, what are the patterns, how can we make changes, who can stand up for people who don't have a voice. It's grounded in the Holocaust, but their curriculum spreads far, far and wide. And so that was a big piece of it. But really, when Smoke and Steph came to our classrooms at Burley Elementary in Chicago, they talked to us about what the inquiry looks like in our classrooms and things that a lot of teachers are already doing. And so there's just this thread that I have in the terms of social justice is giving kids the space to be safe so they can start to ask questions about what isn't right. They're learning about history every day. They're learning it from the books they're reading. They're learning it from their teachers and the kids next to them. But it's really getting them just to have a curious mind about compassion. So that's where that.
We love Facing History. That's such an awesome curriculum.
Yeah.
And what grade did you teach?
In Chicago, I've taught 5th through 8th. Today I teach 6th grade in San Diego.
Sorry, we're in a school right now and the announcements are going on.
Oh, that's okay.
So really quickly, I'll let you talk so that we don't have to listen to all of this. But can you give some ideas, if you were going to give some tips for kids to get started in thinking about how to take charge in their communities and be an upstander, what are some of the big ideas or headlines in this book that you share?
I think one of the most important things that I could tell kids is to start sharing their stories. There's a large piece in the book about identity webs that we start, and that's how we start our year off. It's really important for kids to tell the narrative, and I think even something with if we are talking about Black History Month, identity webs are a way to begin the narrative, and I think as humans we're craving, even if we're reading nonfiction and we're trying to grasp the human experience, it's really difficult for us to do without having some type of connection to that story, to anyone's story. And so for teachers, you would say to model your vulnerability in front of your kids, share your story with them, and hopefully open up the classroom in that way. But I think once you're comfortable, it's not an easy thing to do. I did it probably 10 years ago in a Facing History workshop, and it was emotional and it was difficult, and you're sort of peeling back layers that you can't decide if you want. You're actually starting, it's the beginning of the inquiry process. You're questioning whether or not this is important to you to identify this way. And so I think from there, then you get to tell your story, and that's really empowering for kids.
Can you tell us, so are the identity webs part of the Facing History curriculum, or is that something that you've developed?
The identity webs are part of the Facing History curriculum. That's how I learned them, and that's sort of one of the foundational pieces of their organization. I think we've taken them to different levels. We use them, and Facing History is really geared towards an upper school audience and high school, and so we've been begun to use them with read-alouds and picture books with the kids. And you know, I tell teachers all the time, like, it's not an icebreaker. I think you look at them, you know, and you see your name and you see lots of things that you love and do and all of these things that you claim, but it's not an icebreaker. It's really the beginning of empathy building in your classroom.
And so, from what I hear you saying, even though this might have been something that you started with middle and high school, you can definitely do this with the primary audience or grade students?
Definitely, definitely. A primary audience, actually, I've done this with the primary audience, and I've done this, you know, all the way up through the grade levels and all the way through with adults. But picture books are fantastic. Biography picture books. In a month like Black History Month, that's really, you know, making an attempt to celebrate a narrative that people may not know. It's a great way to start with a picture book, with anything. You know, Molly Banicki's a great one. There's so many that are the sit-ins, lunch counter sit-ins. They're great. So you just take the main characters and you build an identity with the kids. Even at the primary level, you guys are doing it on the chart together, on the rug together. Middle school, we're doing it on the floor together. It's a really great way for everyone to center into the book and be grounded together with it.
So you start with this read aloud, and then does the identity map come second? Is this an example of it right here?
Yep, that's mine.
There you go. And here's Smokey's, right?
Yeah, that's Smokey's. Yeah.
So can you talk us through how to develop this? So for our teachers who are watching and they want to do this in their classroom this month, how do you get your class to start something like this?
Okay, so something like that, I would start with mine. I would start modeling mine on the board, or on our chart paper together on the dot camera, wherever you are. And awesome, thanks. It'll give me a little background. And so I just start to open up. I say, like, you know, we're going to spend this year together. You want to know a little bit about me? I would love to know more about you guys. And so I start to, I have this up on the web, but then at the same time I start, I have a read aloud. I've done this multiple different ways, so I'm speaking in like 4 lanes. You'll see why. But what I usually do is I'll start the read aloud with a character. I use Men of Steel is a great one. It's about the creators of Superman. Yeah, and it's sort of their struggle through the Great Depression, and you know the perseverance that they had to endure. So we start with them, and we put a character on the board, actually. And so as we go, we start to build this list that came from a chart about identity. So I said, what do you guys think of when you think about identity? You know, and I put a couple things up there. And what makes up you? You know, our race, our religion, our ethnicity, our culture, our age, our fashion, you know, our hobbies, things we love. And, you know, and then we grow that list, obviously, as the year goes on. And so we start to build things as we're doing the read aloud. And I say something like, oh, I heard that, you know, he's giving up on this idea the first time, you know, but then he comes back and we talk the story out, and the kids add to the web as we go. What are you seeing happen here, you know? And then that's sort of how I introduce myself. So I start, right after we're done with that, I start with my web. But I bring them in first with the read aloud. Sorry, I told that sort of backwards.
No, that's helpful.
Yeah, so then I start with me, and I share a couple things, but you know, the minute you do that, the kids are so excited to connect to you. So if I start putting down things like, oh, I'm a coach, I love soccer, or I'm a godmother, and you know, I love to dance, and they're like, I dance too, or I love to play soccer, you know. And so they have their notebooks right with them in their laps. In middle school, and I said, oh, write that down in case you forget it. You want to keep it. So I'm doing my web, and then I turn it over to them. And I say, you know, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Use the chart that we have, and just start to build your own story around your web. Tell us about yourself. And then what I do, Jenny, is I take 2 things that are the most important to them, and I let them turn and talk with a buddy. Just at that point, it's a lot of me talking and modeling, so I let them turn and talk with a buddy, and then what I let them do then is ask 2 questions of me, or 2 connections. So I say, who has 2 connections or 2 questions for me? And then that's where the vulnerability comes in for me, and I'm modeling who I am for them, and I said, nothing's off limits, so then they could ask, you know, I have India on my map, and so they might ask about that, and I say, oh, my parents came from there with my big sister when she was 1, and they're immigrants, you know. So I tell that story because it opens up a lot of narratives for kids that are in the room, and makes them feel safe that way as well.
This is great. And then, so how do you help them once they've kind of found who they are, they've done their identity map, they've felt the affinity with you and with the people in the storybooks. How do you move from that to finding issues that they can stand up for and ideas of social justice?
I'm sorry, you cut out just a little bit. I missed
Oh,
that second.
sorry. So how do you move from that? So I totally get and love how you start with a foundation of who you are as a person, your identity, finding affinity with others. Then how do you move from that to taking ideals of social justice and teaching kids how to be upstanders and to understand how to do so appropriately?
Okay, that's a great question, and that takes a lot of building throughout the year. So, in terms of just sort of stepping out to do that, I think what we do is we do use the identity webs as a place to either identify difference or find connection. And so when we're reading throughout history, if I'm already in the space where I can view myself, as a woman, maybe as first generation, or as as a minority, whatever it is that I'm attached to in my labels. And as we read history throughout the year, um, I really turn it. We say looking in and then looking out, and I say look in for just 1 second, right? And we always say to kids, put yourselves in the character's shoes. Like, they can't do that unless they're very comfortable with, number one, who they are, and if they're able to say, I can't put myself in someone's shoes who has endured this type of struggle. And so what they do is I get them in a space, very much in a lot of inquiry classrooms, where you just get them to start asking questions, like, well, if I was a girl in that time period, would I have been able to vote? Would I have been able to go to school with her? Would I have been able to, could I have been in that church that was bombed? There's just so many questions, and so I get them to start doing that. I usually use myself as a first model because it's not, the most comfortable thing to do for kids, but that's how you get them to start asking questions. I think there's an opening vignette about Syria in the book, and it was in the news so much at the beginning of last year, and the kids, we had done identity webs by then, and they're always up in the room, but the kids started to realize in the refugee camps there was faces that looked like them. And I think the narrative of Syria and the stigma of who was there was very different, and they started to realize that the kids were their age, and they were seeing it on CNN Student News and all kinds of places. And so they started to ask questions about those kids. Well, aren't they going to school? What happens? And so that's what you start to do. You start to build their thoughts. And if they're that interested and their hearts are opening up that much, you have to just give them the space, And so I start pulling articles. I found this amazing foundation that we worked with. And I think that's how you do it. You listen, you listen to them. I think, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say that's amazing. So I love this. A lot of times I think we try and do social justice and just jump right in, but the building identity and having them find themselves in the people who they're working to stand up for is important, and I really never thought of it that way before, so that's terrific. So I see we only have a few more minutes. I know that you have to head out, and I have to go as well. So in this last few minutes, I just wanted to see, do you have any other tips for our teachers who are working on these ideas in our schools to get started and to power their students up around these ideals?
I think just the most important thing is, I think I said this in the beginning, is really just, I think that we have demands in curriculum and timing and units and planning and all of these things, and standards, and I understand that. I think, though, it's really important, and I'm taking words from geez, now I'm forgetting. You see, you hear so many good people, but you really think of it in a way of this. I think it was maybe Lucy Calkins that said this, but you really think of kids as the curriculum. The kids are the curriculum, and you can scaffold everything from there. And I think that, that sort of sounds idealist to a lot of teachers. Maybe that could be sitting in their classroom going, I have to get this lesson plan done today. But really, it's listening to the kids, giving them their space, giving them ownership, giving them voice in their room. Because if you do that, especially, in middle school or even primary, high school, kids start talking about the brain, but they have a massive piece in their brain that allows for this empathy and compassion. And so please, listen to them, give them just space to tell their stories. And you will be surprised how much that can open in terms of their connections and hearts and minds to the human experience.
Oh, that's perfect. Perfect way to end. Thank you so much. I love that. The kids are the curriculum. Well, Sarah, thank you for taking your morning with us. I know where you are. It's like 6:30 a.m. So thanks for waking up early.
Okay.
Yeah, So hopefully people are going to be tweeting out around our network about how they're using these ideals to create upstanders in their classroom. This is Sarah's book again, Upstanders with Smokey Daniels. Definitely an awesome resource for your classroom. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you so much.